Again, everyone, welcome to our class, Color and Architecture. This class is being brought to you by Ollie at George Mason University in conjunction with AARP of Virginia. Now I would like to go over to Amber Sultani to talk about AARP.
Hi, good morning and welcome everyone. Thank you, Meg. I'm Amber Nightingale Sultani, and I'm the Associate State Director for Community Outreach here in Northern Virginia. And I just want to provide a brief welcome on behalf of AARP. We are thrilled to continue our collaboration with the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at George Mason University. It's an opportunity for us to bring to our members a chance to take advantage of their rich programs that they offer on the regular basis. And I'd really encourage our members to check out the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute at George Mason University. And if you're not from the Northern Virginia area, if you're joining us from somewhere else around the country, look into a Lifelong Learning Institute in your neck of the woods. From our earliest beginnings, AARP has championed lifelong learning. Our founder, Dr. Ethel Percy Andrews, once said that the eagerness to learn, to pioneer in the development of new skills and new abilities, to broaden the personal scope of understanding, to freshen the mind with new ideas and new concepts, to achieve the new heights of knowledge, has no age restriction. And those words are as true today as when she spoke them in the 1950s. Studies have shown that challenging your brain in new ways throughout your life may strengthen your brain. Our brain is stimulated and makes new connections when we learn new things or pursue new interests. So AARP encourages you to stay curious and give yourself a good mental workout by doing something that challenges your thinking, offers you enjoyment, and encourages you to grapple with the new and complex ideas. And now it is my pleasure to turn the program over to Marianne Metz, who is a board member of Osher Lifelong Learning at George Mason University. Marianne?
Thank you, Amber. Thank you, Amber. This is Marianne Metz. I'm one of Ollie's volunteer program planners for art and music, and also a board member. And I want to welcome you to the last day of Ollie Mason's fall term. This term, Ollie has given us more than 130 classes and lectures. I've attended about 30 of them myself, thanks to our all-you-can-eat membership structure, and I have enjoyed all of them, and I've learned so much. The fall term is ending, but the winter term is coming up, and as you probably know, all of our winter term classes will still be online with Zoom, but winter is the last term for which that's the case, because in the spring, we go into hybrid mode with both in-person and online attendance opportunities. And by the way, if you haven't yet received your winter catalog, you can find it online at ollie.gmu.edu, along with lots of helpful information. That's olli.gmu.edu. Today, I am delighted to introduce another distinguished speaker, Harold Linton, who currently serves as a professor of art and research associate in the School of Art, coordinating George Mason's accreditation self-study and the professional lecture series entitled Visual Voices. He's also the national coordinator for U.S. News Fine Arts Dean's Survey of America's Best Graduate Programs. He also teaches drawing and painting at the university. Professor Linton served as director of the School of Art for 8 years. He is the author of 19 books and numerous journal articles on design, drawing, architecture, and color. Several of his published works have been adopted as textbooks throughout the United States and Asia and Europe. Professor Linton has served as a visiting lecturer in design at more than 100 schools of art and architecture. Among other things, he co-founded the first Master of Arts degree program in color design in Europe, in Helsinki. And the list goes on and on. His CV runs to about 35 pages, and I won't read it all, but I'm glad that today he's bringing his expertise to us, and I'm looking forward to it. It's all yours.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. I hope everybody is doing well. The ground I thought might be interesting to cover today is the relationship between building materials, color concepts, and built architecture. I taught architecture for 25 years in Michigan at Lawrence Tech, and enjoyed it enormously. Later, I was invited to found the first master's degree program in color design at the University of Industrial Arts Helsinki in 1996. I took my family on a journey that everyone since then has gotten full measure, wonderful exposures, and dear to our hearts that we went and explored Finland. I'd like to start with a little bit of history about color and architecture and some of the root ideas that play into what today is a modern, postmodern, contemporary outlook for building materials and visual development of architecture. So with that in mind, there we go. The notion of color in architecture is very involved in the early periods of history and visual and form exploration. And here what you're looking at is a cave drawing done in the Lascaux caves in southern France, where the antelope is drawn in charcoal and pigment over a bulge in the rocks protruding out towards the viewer. So what we're not looking at is a flat depiction of an animal, documenting perhaps an animal that was prevalent then in large numbers. But on the left and the right, we have examples of early illustrations that depict a budding three-dimensional form that happens to be colored to separate from the gray background. As you study the Parthenon and temples throughout Greece and so forth, you come across coloration on columns that are in contrast to the masonry mud brick construction of temples throughout the Mediterranean. And these go way back in history, and you can see the columns have a terracotta hue that was exploratory for early designers who had visions. If you can look to the slide I'm showing and see the three columns, they're orangish, but they're vivid depictions of building materials applied to early construction. As we move through history, even in the 19th century and the 18th century, we come across early modern explorations of engineering design, such as this Schroeder house on the left, which is in grays and white cement. And you can see has yellow details. It has red and blue, the primary colors, as a project in the early portion of the 20th century. The Schroeder house is a fantastic example of dialogue with visual stimulation applied to architectural relief facades. And on the right, you see an example of the architect Le Corbusier on the outskirts of Paris, where he pigmented and dyed the exterior walls of apartment buildings. This is called unitation, habitat unitation, which was one of the first modern apartment blocks built for the masses in France. And here he's playing with the idea of bright colors bouncing daylight into and coloring the interior space of an apartment. All these ideas and more spring to life in the studio, where students have an opportunity who are taking color classes to visualize what might be a possibility for a new application of color to three-dimensional form. And so in order to achieve creative direction and results, students have access to paper swatches, which are a library of swatches you see on the left, and two students choosing paper samples for their next design project. And on the right, we have two triangles that are essentially colored identically, but they're exposed to different temperatures and qualities of neon and fluorescent lighting. And so you can see that the colors of the equilateral triangles are affected by the lighting that's in the ceiling. And so on the right, you have a warmer palette, and on the left, you have a cooler palette, just because of the bulbs that are in the lighting booth area. Students also studying color in relationship to the built environment are exposed to in Europe, it's called the natural color system. In the United States, it's similar to the Munsell color system. They're based on slightly different perceptual variations, but for the most part, they offer the designer technological expertise in judging color, measuring color, and being able to reconstruct color in any given environment, be it three-dimensional, exterior or interior spaces, and so forth. On the left, you see albums that are open to different pages. Those are color variations that were created with a natural color system by tinting or adding white to the pigment, or adding a dark color to affect the shade range. You see in the back on the right, the Munsell color tree that I happen to have with me and included in this photograph. And then you see these albums that are open to their pages, and you see various gradations of hue and chroma. On the bottom right, there's a little device called a chromometer, and that measures the intensity of a hue when exposed to it, and gives the designer a notation, a mathematical notation, as to what color in the natural color system is he photographing or looking at with this device, looking at. On the right, we see a spectrum photometer, which measures, in this case, a yellow color chip has been placed on the dial. And it also is useful to measure translucent liquids and transparent plexiglass, and tracing papers, vellum papers, and so forth, all colored, all can be measured and then reproduced in various other materials. So students actually take advantage of the lighting booth that I showed you in the last slide by staging color transparency installation projects in their studios at the university. And by doing so, they learn and they realize that transparency has an effective layering idea that gives the viewer a sense of progression in space or depth, transparency in depth. Here's a better way of seeing it. What we're looking at on the left are a square and a circle, projected into an interior space and given a sense of greater luminosity by varying the colors, lavender and so forth, in the background. And on the right, we have a pink film overlapping a series of green circles in a grid formation. And you can see in the background, there's something that looks somewhat like a soccer ball, again, being projected in open space. Now, this is a similar idea of building a low relief construction out of architectural foam core board and coloring it with a pigment called designer's gouache, and then defeating the relief, the sense of space in the facade on the left is defeated by coloring the surface more particularly in a color run from yellow to orange. And the black circles also have the effect of developing illusions of flatness. This is a picture on the left of the Rietveld chair, which is contrasted against yellow, red, and blue background as part of a nod to the De Stijl movement in the Netherlands. And on the right, you can see the graphic design of the chair is similar to the wall, blue and yellow wall graphic, but much smaller in detail and size. And that distinguishes, the graphic distinguishes the chair form from the 3-panel wall around it, behind it. And looking back again on the left at the red, yellow, and blue Rietveld chair, you can see that the chair has similar coloration to the background graphic, and therefore it blends in. It's almost the definition of camouflage and blends into the background walls because its design is scaled and structured to be like the 3-plane graphic. This is a project my students do to explore the sense of volume and space by constructing 3 layers of balsa wood struts and coloring them in the orange range, being a 1/2 inch in depth. You can see from looking at the slide on the left, we're looking down into the chamber, and on the right, we've taken a piece of light gray paper and slid it behind the first design. And then we moved it back behind the second design, and then on the right, we pulled it out. And so you see how designs can be affected by gradations and constellations of three-dimensional thinking. In other words, the physical construction of this piece is not as illusionary as looking at the full dimension of gradation of color on a three-dimensional form, which creates a question in the minds of people designing theater and stage design as to how they will focus an illusion of space with certain attributes of theater design on stage, and how that can be extended into mood and emotion that enhances the play or the theater production that's underway. One way of looking at this is to bring it to a context, a residential context of an apartment building, which they do at MIT Architecture in Boston. They build scale models of interior spaces, and they test the relationship of lighting fixtures inside the scale model, as well as beaming into it from outside the scale model, and what kinds of effects on what kinds of colored surfaces extend the idea of space through transparency or through volumetric exposure. This would be a volumetric exposure to yellow-green. It's a cardboard model on the left, the real entryway lobby on the right. It was designed by Gerhardt and Odell from Cranbrook Academy. And the challenge was to transform a apartment lobby into a narrative that would hold together and create a sense of passageway to condominium units above the ground floor. And this is again Gerhardt and Odell's model on the left for the atrium space at Cincinnati Bell Telephone in Cincinnati. And he has designed these transparent, I guess what I'm trying to wrestle with here is that these are linear elements in a transparent kind of a weaving that when installed on the picture on the right, create a sense of progression and form that evolves slowly and effectively in an interior skylit space. So from modeling, which we've been working on in 3 dimensions, we gain a sense of the possibilities of increasing overall experience of space and direction in architecture and interior design. So virtual space is on the frontier. There we go. Here's taking the chromometer and the spectrum photometer and measuring color surfaces, bricks, and related masonry and cement construction, and producing a palette that you see way off to the right of extremely subtle neutrals. And then bringing all that information of manufacturers, brick colors and paneling system colors to an area in a commercial sector of Japan, and making decisions by trying to insert certain sequences of color to enhance the entryway to this rather upscale office building. And Jean-Philippe Lenclos, who happens to be one of the world's most renowned colorists for architecture, provides us with a glimpse into his studio practice here that you see on the right, masonry examples that are matched to color paper swatches created with gouache or cut from larger sheets of colored paper. Here he's developing a range of colors that will be inserted, if you will, into a graphic for a large apartment block, residential units there you go, in a outskirts suburban context. On the right, you can see color progressions from red to red-orange, and on the left, you see yellow moving through tertiary colors like orange and brown. This is a project I worked on in Helsinki, was to bring color and light to interior spaces that were defined by commercial buildings and office buildings that wanted to bring people to a bar-like a restaurant atmosphere after work, create a space that, in other words, is lively, inviting, and brings people beyond 5 o'clock into contact with each other, social atmosphere. And this building was unique from all 3 sides, and it was created with glazed brick tiling systems to break up the symmetry of the building and give it more unique appearance of sculptural / architectural form. And the abstraction of tulips in a reflecting pool also is an opportunity to invest color and liveliness into this design. This is the work of Eva Fay, who is one of the most well-known color architectural designers in Australia. And here she's looking at a older building that has relief facades in an Art Deco framework of design or style of design. And she is developing color concepts to execute this in paint on the building, transforming it from a residential to a movie theater, commercial stores, and so forth. She's interested in driving the Art Deco image in relief because it really was a building facade relief surface. And so she's working on watercolor paper with colored pencil. And then on the left, she executes her final design in gouache on watercolor paper. And you can see the background white that's meant to represent the sky. And on the right, she had the building painted to match her experiments in drawing and design on the left and in the previous slides. And so you see on the right how distinction can be very lively and entertaining by working in a palette that's open. In other words, a monochromatic palette would be yellow to orange or red to purple. Um, Her palette for this facade is complementary, meaning oranges and yellows in contrast with ultramarine blues and deep browns and sienna. So there again is the unpainted version. Another process that's being explored rather subtly and successfully is the use of rollers and stucco cement surfaces on office buildings, and how not to overpower the viewer with bright, um, chromatic, intense colors, but to create a softer, more impressionistic um, design and palette. And so you see on the right, a stucco texture is covered with three relatively not bright, but soft colors. And the transparency of rolling over it, viewed from a distance, you see on the image on the left, has a violet, very, very soft violet cast to it. This is also another practitioner of large scale architecture colorations. Her name is Jerry Kavanaugh, and she works in California. And you can see on the right that she's not afraid of mixing paint and contrasting that to paper swatches of colored, different colors. And you can see she's pulled together some building materials, rocks and turquoise, jewels, and so forth, to give her a sense of the palette in sky blue and forest green, and then into terracotta and the reds and browns. Oops. There we go. And she transposes her designs, not just through drawing, but through taking colored papers and adhering them to foam core boards, and then building a relief construction of the facade, this being a hospital, children's hospital in California, that was very successful. Another example of glazed brick is found in the GM Tech Center in Warren, Michigan, where the building designed by Eero Saarinen has a wonderful play of color and light on both the outside and the inside. And here you can see orange enamel brick on the left and blue towards the middle and background. When we go inside the building, we see the colors spill over into the interior design, and these wonderful open and transparent stairwells tease the viewer into participating with the idea of progression in space, movement. This was designed by the Smith Group. It's a half-mile long Veterans Administration hospital in Detroit, Michigan. And the job here was to explore the possibility of patterning to enrich the facades of these buildings, which you can see on the left have a kind of a turquoise and then a yellow and a red, burnt red coloration per each section of the building. In the VA hospital realm, certain areas are dedicated to certain medical issues. And so that's why you're seeing some breaks in the color runs from red to yellow, yellow to blue. And on the left is a model of the facades, and you can see more distinctively that the blue and the pink and yellow and into the sort of red brown range has been preserved, and on the right has been applied in a real, that's a real photograph of the finished appearance of the project. Then when we start to think about enriching interior space, um, and how we can bring more animate experiences to interior living, the opportunity presents itself to color the walls in which our artwork and family materials hang. And so we move into various ranges of color in order to do this. One being deep, dark, tertiary colors that you see on the right, and on the left, a combination of some of those colors with coffee and different kinds of browns and so forth. And when we apply those to the wall treatments of someone's collection of art and memorabilia, we see how the contrast complements the artwork at the same time, pops it out from the wall and makes it, gives it more animation and liveliness. So this being a terracotta wall treatment in a area, a bathroom with glass block and granite uh, granite on the sort of the wainscoting. And on the right, you can see that this area of the apartment has been treated very lightly with a kind of eggshell white and some mint green and so forth to bring out the collector's artwork and give it contrast and again enliven the space it's hanging in. Now, this is Eva Fay working in the harbour area in Australia, in Sydney, to take a home which is perched on top of a hillside overlooking the bay. And you can see on the left, her color palette runs from warm to cool with blue violets and kind of soft coffee-like colors on the left, excuse me. And on the right, you can see how she's applying these colors to the exterior of the building. Again, she's likening these colors and connecting them to various natural materials in stone and masonry that sit in the environment on the ground. And on the right, she's framing a new palette that she's going to bring into the interior space that connects the outside to the inside. So there you have the sort of dusty blue greens and the terracotta color on the left, and then the client's collection of furniture and so forth in contrast. This is a example of a religious building in Helsinki that was colored with the psychological idea in mind that for many months out of the year, there's very little light in Finland and Sweden and Norway. And so the buildings and their interiors must respond to the idea that people live there 12 months around the year, and that children play there and go to school and so forth. And we must design a interior palette that complements the needs of the people and gives them visual relief. And so that's why the palette is fully around the spectrum: blues, violets, yellows, oranges, but in different locations within the interior space. Here you can see a palette of neutrals. This is called the Apollo bar. It's a Spanish interior design project. And you can see the soft colors in violets and so forth on the left, and the camel colors and the ultramarine blues on the right. This being a neutral palette, and being open to other opportunities for colored artwork and so forth, brightly colored artwork to come and be hung in the space. You really can't talk about color without talking about light at some level. And this being one of the more interesting architectural scale stained glass window projects to come along in quite a while. The question is, how does the designer or artist wish to use glass? And to what extent will it be an individual expression of his or her own work, or be an expression of a project in the making in a given environment? Charles Ross is the patent owner of the world's largest prisms. Here he has them located on the outside of the building, and they cast light at all hours of the day and night. Very intriguing. And here he has them on motors, so they rotate. This being a high-rise GM headquarters building in Detroit, is filled with concrete and dazzling displays of spectrum light filtered through these 12-foot long prisms, 1 foot on each face of 3 sides. And so I wanted to show you illustrations of computer renderings and compare them to real visualizations of this being in a bar near a subway stop in London, with a 2-story atrium space that was colored with vivid open palette. Color in relationship to large industrial facilities, this being a titanium plant in Israel, gives the viewer the opportunity to distinguish between the functions of the buildings and the purpose of the factory, just by the sheer amount of color and its location and placement. Does the design team an enormous advantage. Loaders have been in the news recently as boats languish off the coast waiting to be unloaded. This firm designed a color run from yellow to orange to distinguish their loaders from other loaders, and also to locate and orient it near the boats where they would come close to the loader to be unloaded. So we see a grand variety of architects working with designers, interior designers, color designers, and so forth, to help create identity, to help create individuality. This being a library building, a public library building in Arizona, you can see the interior is bathed in yellow light, yellow paint, and the exterior is, again, a very kind of burnt red-orange, to create some definition of what the building's purpose is. In this case, it's a library. In this case, it's an engineering building at Rice University. And it's telling the story of the location of the building through visual cues, which you can see on the right, have to do with patterning and the Indian culture that inhabited this area that was later transformed into a university. But you can see the abstractions of rivulets of water in blue and yellow grills and the brick patterning and so forth. The columns are a nod to various periods in architecture and so forth that preceded this. On the right, you can see these stairwells are magical in their coloration as they transcend the various heights of the spaces. And on the left, you can see this is one of the world's largest printing presses for computer generated imagery. You can see on the right how vast that ceiling application of a printed watercolor-like graphic that is installed, and a continuation of the columns. And I'd like to close this portion of the presentation by just saying that not everything we do is for monetary gain. Oftentimes, and more recently, what we do as designers and architects and colorists and so forth is to find projects that relate to children or climate, environment, and so forth, that are in need of individuality of thinking and visual expression. And so here you can see this ground floor is being prepared for various kinds of children's activities. And it's a home for, it's a living, playing, and experimenting workshop space, residential workshop space for children who are basically lost. Rich, warm environment, light and lively, draws their attention into participating in events and programs put on for their benefit.
Yay.
Are we good?
We are good.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You know where you go?
Yeah, okay, well, I wanted to include a nod to the experience that we had in Europe, especially in Helsinki, because of the nature of light in the country and its geography, and the nature of the materials that define the environment. It's a very unusual place to live, and the quality of experience that one has in design over there is affected directly by um, the unique um, opportunities to hike and camp, to explore vegetation. And I guess I could say this with almost certainty. It's one of the richest deposits of subtle variations of color of granite that's shipped all over the world, especially in Europe. Um, there are more variations of building materials and so forth that are used by designers from Finland. So here we see, let's see, back up a minute. Here we see on the right, um, Finland is outlined in yellow marker, and then Sweden. And here it's in the upper left-hand corner, and you can see a little bit of this boat pulling up. One of the things, these are the Orland Islands, which are sort of between Finland and Sweden. And one of the things that they do is they require you to go on an excursion, a camping excursion, um, on or near the Orland Islands. And you can see the granite outcropping sort of above the water's edge on the right. And so when you're there for a week, on sort of no electricity, no running water, um, just you and your resources. You explore things that you typically don't stop and see in our normal hustle and bustle of everyday life. And so on the right, you have an opportunity to experience heather, which grows in abundant, subtle variations of hue all across Northern Europe. And it's especially interesting in its sort of isolation on the Orland Islands, which is where we camped for a week. And here you see, way in the background, a few of us walking. And in the dramatic forms and shapes, the contours, if you will, of these outcroppings of stone are very sculptural and unusual in their appearance and dimension. And one of the things that Finns are known for is building a sauna before they build their home. And in order to do that, they have tremendous skill in working with wood. And so this book that I picked up at the university was an exploration of Finnish traditions in working in wood. And here you can see the sort of the sauna and the steam on the left, and on the right, the exterior view. Make no mistake about it, the Finns and the Swedes and the Norwegians and so forth are not afraid of working with color of any sort of intensity in their summer homes. And that's what we're looking at here on the left. And on the right, close to the coastline and in Europe, are these wonderful sculptural just bubbling up of light and color and texture that make it very inviting, intriguing. Swans are the national bird of Finland. Um, they're protected, highly protected. Close up on some of the natural vegetation. Loads of wildlife and sea animals and birds. And then every once in a while, you discover something that seems so unusual based on your prior exposure. Now, this being the subtle variations of texture and rock in this sort of open cave on the right, and on the left, the sculptural individual pieces that fit together so neatly and cleanly on the left. Rock outcroppings. And then the quality of light is something you'll never forget if you spend time there, because of the vegetation and light is so dim at certain periods and seasons of the year. In other periods and seasons of the year, it's vivid and intense. You can read a newspaper outside at until 11 o'clock at night in the summertime. In the wintertime, everything is misty and gray and neutralized. This is a city map. The University of Industrial Arts Helsinki was later renamed the University Alvar Aalto University in honor of the famous architect and designer. On the right is the port where the big ships and Celia Line and so forth come to dock. And it's also the place home of the Russian Orthodox Cathedral, which is one of the most beautiful interior colorations of any building I've ever experienced, with this beautiful eggshell white gray. Hard to explain unless you're there seeing it, but it brings a kind of a warmth to the space that is a focal point that is unique and in a way heavenly. A very contemporary look at church design leads you to see what's called the Dome in the Rock church. And the Finnish word for it is Templialkio Kirkki, which interprets unusual sculptural experience awaits you when you walk into the building. Here you can see rows of chairs and so forth with the stonework running around you on the outside of the building. In Christmas time, they place little metal posts in between the bricks, and they put a candle on each one and light the candles with regular match, which give the interior space of the building an unbelievable glow. That's a little closer towards the stonework that you can see on the right slide. Contemporary design and city planning is part of the cultural life, the evolution of art in the country. Here you can see contemporary sculpture on the left. And city planners are constantly winning awards for how they've integrated art into the environment and how they've used engineering and architecture to create transitions of spaces that enhance living and learning. This is where we lived in Helsinki while I taught at the university. And that's my apartment building on the top left with that open uh, sort of slice through the top floor for windows. That's one of the inlets on the right that houses small boats that take you out into the Baltic. I was interested, that's me on the left. I was interested in learning how to drive a tram while we were there. And I was teaching and also going to school, tram school. Eventually, they let me drive, pick up passengers, and drop off throughout the city. But first, you have to prove yourself. And you learn about the car washing tram center and how to maintain the tram in the off hours. And you see people on the streets that have been veterans of various wars and kids who are studying music and theater. One thing that is very nice about living there is that the produce and the vegetables and fruits and so forth are all very fresh. And so there's an abundance of beautiful things to look at as well as to eat. Fruit and pastries are typical of European life. Here's the beginning of the new Chiasma Contemporary Art Museum, which was under construction when we were there. And its influence a little bit from Eliel Saarinen's design for the train station, the main train station in downtown Helsinki. You see great examples of Art Nouveau in the architecture in various sections of the city. And grants are available for architects to reconfigure and rebuild from the ground up sometimes. These testimonies to period style design, Art Deco, Art Nouveau, residential areas. This is the University of Industrial Arts Helsinki, which is one of the largest I should say, it is the largest factory of ceramics in the world, and has a very special workshop on the top floor for ceramic artists who wish to spend a semester or a year there in production of their work. And here we see stone pavers leading up to a residence that's made of wood and shingles for the ceiling. And on the right, poured concrete. Very unique and interesting collaboration of art and expertise, architecture. Nokia purchased one of my paintings in a show that I was included in at the Finnish Embassy in Washington, D.C. And they have come a long way in in telecommunications, especially. Here on the left, we see industrial design objects, which are a skill that the Finns have developed over a long period of time. They build these boats, world's largest cruising ships, downtown Helsinki. And they're also known for MRI machine design and dental chairs, medical chairs that adjust to various positions and postures. Artec is the home of Alvar Aalto's furniture design, which is all constructed from bent wood, hardwood. Here you can see the concept studies and the detail of the arm construction. Fiskars are known throughout the world. The Finns have captured the essence of function and comfort in the design of the handles of these scissors, which is not unlike much of what they do in the rest of the industrial design world. They're uniquely capable people. And here we have Mary Mako. Mary Mako finished design in fabrics and weavings and textiles and so forth. Architecture in Finland tends to be form and function at the forefront. But there's room for experimentation, as you can see in this exterior kind of funny coloration. Ice cream is extremely popular. Why not? And the collection of drawings and paintings in the National Gallery is top. Here you can see the Parliament building, and on the right, installation in front of the National Museum, Art Museum. They have a strong collection of abstract contemporary paintings. And here's the home of L.L. Saarinen. When you walk in, you're struck by the coloration and fabrics and textiles that the family produced and designed, executed. Textural drawings and tiling designs on the ceilings, which were very organic in the first place. There you can see a little more. These are a couple examples of L.L. Saarinen's freehand drawings, which he did throughout various stages of architectural design creation. That's L.L. Saarinen on the left. His son, Eero Saarinen, was responsible for the Jefferson Memorial Arch in St. Louis, the JFK terminal in New York, and a wide variety of contemporary projects in the States. Here we see a clustering of brightly colored summer one of our students created a stone column structure on the outskirts of Helsinki. So we all went out to look at it and check its progress and direction for development. They use granite in the tiling of the tram tracks throughout the city. They have a walking history of architectural styles of building design on an island adjacent to the city. And it's 300 or 400 years of architectural buildings. This is the work of Alvar Aalto in glass at a factory outside of Helsinki called Iittala. In the summer, the light is prevalent for 22 hours a day. And so projects like this, which include symbolism of a burning bush, a burning tree, happen in June, and other kinds of activities are staged throughout the calendar. Okay, I have one more video to share if I can. Do we still have time?
Yes. And if you click on your escape button, that will get you out of your slideshow, or just click anywhere on the slideshow to exit. There we go. And you should be able to get back to your desktop if you close this PowerPoint. That would be the red circle.
This next design is a celebration of our new art building in, let's see if I can, here we go. Is the sound?
Yes.
It's open during 9.
We received a letter from the art faculty, I think the first meeting we had. We read it amongst the team and we were just blown away because it was challenging us. It was saying to us, help us be better. And they were already an incredibly strong program. They have great faculty, but they wanted the building to challenge them.
What surprised me about the building? What surprised me about the building was the quality of light and how that quality of light affects the way people engage.
The building is art in and of itself, so that the students can be inspired by that. They can see, that the architects really thought about this as a composition, and that it could teach them things about what they might want to do in the future.
The effect it's had on the art making is that there's more of it, and the students are energized and they want to come in and make things.
The concept evolved that the building itself would be a canvas, that it would be a point of departure for the art to start from, that every decision that we made tried to support that, from the color of the brick on the exterior that could act as a backdrop for sculpture placed in landscape, to the way we lit the corridors so that every single piece of drywall in the building was an opportunity for students to mount art, that the central stair, the exterior stairs, every piece of the building had to be fitted perfectly in so that painting studios had the right light from the north. The sculpture studios had access to the outside. Every little piece of it was so specific. And then the central stair, the piazza space, it's a vibrant place. It's a place where students come together, where faculty come together, and it really is the kind of central space, the nexus of where art is made and where art is discussed and where art is shown, and it really is a vibrant place.
Good architecture, and good design, good thinking pays dividends to the people who use it. And you just walk around, you see that taking place. And that, knowing that and then seeing it work, seeing it in action really surprises me in a great way.
And if you would click on stop share, we would get back to just you. There we are. We do have a couple questions for you. First, what is the town? What town is the library in Arizona? In what town?
That's a good question. I'm supposed to know that off the top of my head. I'd have to look it up.
Okay. And the name and location of the circular building with the circular colored windows, I think it was the project in stained glass that was featured
Mhm.
before the GM building.
Yeah. Yeah, I apologize. I'm drawing a blank.
Okay. Then we're going to move on to this next question. What time were you in Finland?
1996, 97.
Pardon me, what time of year?
Oh, full year,
You
12
were
months.
day and night, one of each season.
Mhm.
Can you speak a little more on the psychology of color in commercial spaces as well as residential spaces?
Anything in particular that you have seen or experienced that you'd like a reaction to?
Cleta, if you can narrow your question, that would be helpful. Because I read you exactly what I had. Let me see. And where is the art building? That should be on George Mason somewhere, yes?
Yeah, it's on the campus in Fairfax. The stained glass with the two round red areas is part of Valentina Village complex in Italy, Noci Bari, Italy. It's the work of Brian Clark.
Okay. Looking back through my chats and see if there's anything else.
I'm looking for the library location.
And Wynn asks, can you share the links of the video to the GMU Art and Design building?
Yeah. I could email it to.
That would be great. You can email it to me and I will make sure it gets out to everyone who attended.
Okay.
And most of the comments and questions we're getting now are thanking you for your awesome presentation and saying what a wonderful and enlightening experience it was.
That's very kind and sweet, and I thank them enormously.
And Lucy Freeman asks, what aptitude does one need to be an architect?
One what?
What aptitude does one need to be an architect?
Well, you need a blend of science and design, a grasp of technology, because computers are so prevalent in everything that architects do. San Antonio Library.
Okay, Rachel, that was San Antonio Library.
Yeah, mine said.
That's okay. I think that's all the questions I have. So once again, thank you for a wonderful presentation. We are just a little bit over time anyway. So is there any thought you want to finish up with? Or if not, I'll say goodbye.
No, that's fine. I apologize for my hemming and hawing. It has something to do with Parkinson's, which I've been wrestling with for the last 10 years. So I appreciate everybody's patience with me.
Well, thank you again, and goodbye for now.
Take care.